And you've got, Canadians are leaving. They are sick and tired of the unaffordable depression in Canada. I don't know what signals depression more than when your fucking population can't afford to buy food. Canada's banks are poorly prepared for an economic implosion, which is already happening. So we're going to get into that and what is really happening under the skin of the economy. And 1 in 5 students cannot find a summer job. I mean, it's a shocking statistic. And as Shazzy points out here, this is the first time ever that it's been this way. And guess what? If you look at this, it goes all the way back to the late 1970s here. So all the way back to the late 1970s, and you have never seen this if you obviously exclude the pandemic. So that just shows the desperation. But unfortunately, it gets worse and it gets really sad here, as I've pointed out on X. Over 2 million Canadians use the food bank, 700,000 children. Just think about that for a second. And not many people realize, because if you lined all the people up going to the food bank every single day, those lines would be miles long, exactly like the Great Depression. But you've got people coming and going in cars all the time. You've got the drive-thrus that they do. So that means a lot of that growth in food bank usage isn't as visible as you would think it is. And I've also pointed out this as well. Over 3 trillion in Canadian debt, over 2.25 trillion tied to the crumbling housing market in the form of mortgage debt. Yeah, it's a bubble. But I want to point out here, I went to this TD Economics report and I couldn't believe that they wrote this, because all the data is out there right now, but the banks are kind of in denial about what is really happening in the housing market. Don't just take it from me. And TD Economics is one of the better ones in terms of the big 5 banks when they come to stuff like this. And they actually published this back in December, but I totally missed it. Basically, it's comparing the Ontario housing market to the 90s crash. And we've seen a lot of these similarities that have come out over the past couple of months. So it's really interesting. So based on the ratio of sales to new listings, Ontario's housing market conditions have deteriorated to their loosest since the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Moreover, there's some risk the ratio drops to levels last seen in the 80s and 90s housing downturn, which has happened. Obviously, this was December, but we know now that that has happened. And they said, fortunately, there are good reasons to think an outcome will be avoided, including a more resilient economy and a relatively favorable path for interest rates compared to back then. And obviously, we know what's going on with interest rates now. The Bank of Canada is obviously holding interest rates at 2.75%. And just to give you context, 2.75%, you have to go all the way back to 2008, around that time, to get rates of that level. And they were much lower in the early 2000s. So 2.75% is still high when you consider all of the debt that was took on from 2004 to 2022. So it's absolutely crazy to me, because rates are still high when you consider when all the debt was taken on. But what's interesting about what they're saying here is obviously that they think a favorable interest rate path is going to be what saves the housing market, when we know that's not the case. The unemployment rate continues to go up in Canada, and that's going to continue to put strain onto things like the housing market, obviously, when you think about everything that's going on. And then just to give you an idea of where affordability is, I want to go to this RBC housing affordability report here, because some of the numbers are just completely insane, to be honest. The share of income a household would need to cover ownership costs percentage, and this is what the bank has obviously calculated here. So take it with a grain of salt. Could be more, could be less. But Vancouver, 98.8%. Calgary, 41.5%. Edmonton, 33.6%. Toronto, 70.8%. Ottawa, 45.6%. Montreal, 48.2%. These are insanely high statistics. And then if you look at this chart here, you can see how the ownership costs have just absolutely absolutely skyrocketed here. And you can see that, oh, look, a similar thing actually happened during the 1990s as well, followed by a bust that went on for years and years and years. And eventually it came down to that long-term average there and under it. And we're nowhere near that long-term average right now. And the thing that this doesn't capture with the condos here, because that's the only line that has fell under this, is the fact that condo fees are so insane right now. Condos were nothing like they are today back in the 1990s with all these facilities and these high, massive fees. I mean, some of the new condo fees, they're as high as the mortgage payments. And I don't know what people are thinking when they buy these things, because what are they going to be like in 4 or 5 years? So it's really crazy when you think about everything that's going on with condos, and that could really be a bad sign for the housing market. And you've got, Canadians are leaving. They are sick and tired of the unaffordable depression in Canada. And it really is a depression that is going on in Canada and unfolding. If those food bank statistics don't show you that, I don't know what will. Unemployment is rising. 1 in 5 youths can't find a job. Do you want any more statistics? The fact is that when people lose their job, a recession, then it suddenly becomes a depression, as that cliche saying actually goes. So you got more and more people that are leaving Canada. This is just going to continue and continue to accelerate. So I would advise, get the out of there before the government tries to stop you, because I'm sure that they're looking at these statistics thinking, how can we stop people? Not how can we improve Canada and make people stay? Because unfortunately, that's the backward government that you have in Canada, and people voted in. And then Danielle Foch on X, he posted this chart which says home ownership unaffordability is 2 times higher in Canada than the US and OECD. The OECD takes into account a lot more countries, because we often see this comparison between Canada and the United States, but using all the OECD countries, that gives an even bigger picture. And you can see once again, Canada is just sky high. Like, it's just unbelievable and unaffordable. And you have to go back to that RBC report. There is not one major city on this list here where it's below 30%. Edmonton is kind of close to that, and that's a place that people are rushing to speculate right now as well and drive up the prices there, and then that'll cause a bust there as well. It's just the way these things obviously work, but it's showing you how bad the situation is. And now I wanted to show you this because I asked Warren AI here, if the banks in Canada think the economy is resilient when it's not, then could their loan loss provisions be wildly inadequate? And basically they said Canadian banks reported a combined loan loss provision of over $3.89 billion, even as economic signals like the Ivy PMI show 2 straight months of contraction, and analysts warn of a technical recession. I've been saying recession since 2022, since unemployment has been rising, since growth of the economy has been abysmal, since productivity has been declining. All these things, you don't need a technical recession to know what is really going on in the economy. And this mismatch raises a red flag. If banks are too optimistic about resilience, their loan loss buffers could be dangerously thin, especially if unemployment jumps or credit quality deteriorates faster than expected. But here's the thing, credit quality is deteriorating. I mean, just look at the unemployment rate, and you've just got to see, if you put this out historically now, you're at a high. You've got the pandemic here, but if we pull this out a little more here, you can see 7%. That's a high. You have to go all the way back to where Canada just marginally dodged a recession, and there was still a recession in Alberta during 2015, 2016 to get numbers that were that high. So unemployment is clearly rising here. And as they point out as well, you've got the Ivy PMI that is dropping. You've got all kinds of signals that are going on, like what is happening at food banks, that more and more people, more and more Canadians are needing to go to food banks because they cannot afford to eat. I mean, I don't know what signals depression more than when your population can't afford to buy food. I mean, that is really the crux of it. If people can't afford to buy food, then what do you have? Like, that is a bare necessity to live, is food and water, and then electric comes after that. But if you can't afford one of them, I mean, your economy, it's failing. And I just feel like that these mainstream media outlets and different reporting agencies and people who are way out of touch with the economy just don't understand that. But that is the reality that you're seeing. And that's why there's so many people in desperation. There's so many people that are on the streets. There's so much rising crime. And it's also another reason why so many people are looking for that exit and going and leaving because they've had enough. Now, last thing I just want to show you here, loan loss provisions compared to the leverage ratios here, because it is kind of interesting. They take these three banks for some reason, but the Royal Bank of Canada has loan loss provisions of 2.88 billion. That's what you always hear in the mainstream media. You never hear this number here, which is their net loans, 730.76 billion. So that's such a low percentage of loan loss ratio to loans. I'll put the percentage on screen. And then you've got the National Bank. They don't even have a billion, but they have $200 billion worth of loans. So under 1% in loan loss provisions. I mean, what happens if defaults go to 4-5%? I mean, that's not even high. When you look at the financial crisis in the United States, you had default rates that were getting to 12-13% for single family homes and even higher for the more risky loans. So it just goes to show how bad it can get. And then you've got Laurentian Bank, which we've talked about many times on this channel. They've got 42.51 million in loan loss provisions. They've got this insane leverage ratio, and they've also got $25 billion worth of loans. So they're the lowest here. And they posted a loss that you will remember that we covered on this channel last year. So I don't know what's going on with this bank, but I would be very cautious. And Laurentian Bank is a systemic bank. That's what people have to remember. They are systemic to the banking system. They are a chartered bank, and not a lot of people know that. So if they go bust, yeah, they're a smaller bank, but they're still a systemic bank. So they matter to the entire financial system in Canada, and it can have domino effects that happen. And obviously what's going on there with their loan loss provisions, it's pretty weird. We're going to have to continue to monitor what happens with their earnings, whether there's any other clangers that get dropped. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this video, I would highly recommend that you check out this video here. And then if you're looking for a VPN and want to help support the channel at the same time, then get the VPN that I use, and the one I'm using right now, that is ExpressVPN, and a link is in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.